Thanks for tuning in to the Replatform podcast sponsored by Attract and Hypersonics and hosted by myself, James Gerd. A warm welcome. It's your first episode. And also, we put a lot of time into creating all this great free content. So please help us keep the podcast free and going. Refer us to other people in your network. Let them know we exist. Share our posts on LinkedIn and Twitter. That'd be great. And also give us a rating on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you haven't already, it helps boost our visibility. Right, so thanks. And we hope you enjoy this latest episode. So let me set it up before I introduce our wonderful guest. So we are talking today about Patchworks' new BI solution, which has been recently launched. Very exciting, a lot of buzz going around it. So you want to get under the hood. We're going to look at the data capabilities it provides, integrations with leading e-commerce platforms, roadmap focus. So a warm welcome to a long-time friend of the podcast, Jim Herbert, who's now CEO at Patchworks. Hey, Jim, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. Very pleased to be here. And thanks for having me on, Ben.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. You were previously GM at Ecommerce. We've done podcasts for you there. You got an impressive track record on digital tech scene, and we were talking pre-recorded about being the old men of the industry. So I think we might need to create a lifetime achievement award for this podcast for you.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm very pleased to see I was in the top 10 with the last one. It'd be interesting to see if it's me or Ecommerce going forward with this one here. But yeah, I mean, it's all about, that experience is, very useful to people ultimately, I think. And, joining Patchworks, which is quite a young company in terms of sort of demographics, it's been brilliant to be in for 7 weeks now, ultimately, and giving us some of the benefit of that experience. So help drive the company forward.
Yeah, excellent. And do you want to just give a very quick positioning? We're going to talk about the BI specifically, but for those who haven't worked with Patchworks, how would you define what Patchwork is and does?
Yeah, so Patchworks is basically an iPaaS platform. We're trying to come up with some kind of slightly cooler mechanism around that. I was having a conversation with Kenny Gooch about it the other day. It's like, we're more than just an iPad, bluntly. But what is that? Why would you come to Patchworks and ask to work with us? So typically, you'll know, James, as well, I was listening to last week's edition of the podcast, that, integrations can be a part of projects that go wrong, really quickly. And going back to the days I used to do with Generic, my old SI back in the day, a fully integrated stack is where you start to really see the benefits of e-commerce, right? It's that whole I'm selling while I'm asleep thing where, orders come in the front end, they go straight through to your 3PL at the back end, and they churn out and people buy them and, receive them and you get the cash, right? So you really need that to have an efficient operation. So the idea of Patchworks is very much the idea of SaaS. In the past, you would go down the route of probably building those integrations yourselves or using a piece of kind of more old-fashioned middleware. I actually installed Mule back in 2007 when it was open source, pre-Salesforce. And of course, then I had to size servers, make sure it all worked, it was secure. And so Patchworks does all that bit for you, ultimately. So the product itself, we have it running in the cloud. It's all running in AWS Kubernetes now. I always pronounce that wrong because, again, old man of e-commerce, these are all new things. But fundamentally, we auto scale, we're secure, and we have a really nice UX front end with pre-built connectors into systems. That mean that if you're on one of the top 5 SaaS e-commerce platforms, if you're on BigCommerce, Shopify, Commerce Tools, Woo, or even Magento, which is partly SaaS or monolith, if you want to look at it that way, even while BigCommerce hat on. You can effectively connect through things like NetSuite, Dynamics, Peoplebox. I'm going to annoy somebody here by not mentioning them, but also pods like Lightspeed or Vic on the ERP side, or Situ again on the pod side. The idea being is you can build a really sophisticated tech stack with less requirement on back-end devs ultimately. So I'd sadly have spent, like I say, I've had 23 plus years in e-commerce, 30 years nearly in actual programming, and a large amount of my life, it seems to be, is actually automating the job of my peers, which is pretty poor, but that's the root of IT, right? It's all about making it as easy as possible to go live as quickly as possible and to make more money ultimately. Take the TCO savings of SaaS and then improve your conversion rate, improve your knowledge of your product, and sell as much as possible.
Excellent. So with that position in mind, the first question, which is, so why is an integration specialist introduced a BI tool? So what was the rationale behind launching this to the market? What was the need?
So, and this is completely because I asked the same question during my interview process last year. I was like, this is a bit of an odd one. I thought we were an integration solution. There's really good knowledge and background to it ultimately. So Dave, the founder, Dave Wiltshire, and some of the guys within the team, a couple of customers actually asked for that. They sort of said, fundamentally, all our data goes through your platform. If you look at the analytics capabilities of an e-commerce platform, they're normally pretty good. You're looking at something like Google Analytics maybe as well, to augment that. And there's always that conversation, right? Even though we've all worked on lots and lots of projects, how do we do analytics is a key one. But if you're looking at it from the point of view of being a retailer, not just an e-commerce director, actually, you don't have all that data in the e-commerce platform. You don't have your returns data, which is important. We always talk about average order value, conversion rate, and number of page, number of visitors being the three key e-commerce metrics. But actually, returns rate, particularly in fashion, massively impacts that. If you're ordering 6 pairs of jeans and returning 5, not quite as good as it looks from the e-com director perspective. We've got all that data flowing through Patchworks, right? So the point was, we can take that data, put it into a data lake, put some standard reports together. And again, coming back to that kind of putting the merchant first, giving them the help that they need to trade, we could then put some standard reports together that they can go and use ultimately to really trade the stock that they have. So the idea actually came out last year. We built a kind of pre-beta version of this, which we've got a few customers working on and using right now. And then it's like, actually, let's make this go gold. Let's actually use this in the proper way. So we have a Snowflake data lake. They're the market leader in data ultimately that we put the data into, and then we use Microsoft Power BI, which we wrapped and effectively white label within the product itself. I know it's going to come on to another question later on. What it allows us to do is build those standard reports and then get them out there to the customers, so that effectively they can look at those reports, have a trusted source of truth for that data that doesn't have the, your JavaScript must have failed, or the e-commerce platform is not saying this or whatever else. This is data that you can really trust and use it really easy. Ultimately, the idea is that if you come to us saying, I want to use your BI solution, how quickly can we go live? Well, with the data going through the platform, from the point we stitch Patchworks into your e-commerce platform, you can start you start looking at that data within a couple of days. It takes us about 2 days to get you live. Ultimately, we have a couple of consultants that come in, make sure that all the mappings are correct. You might have something funny going on in your ERP or whatever. If you want us to load the data in from the last couple of years historical, obviously there's a smaller bit of work that takes place there as well. But we've got standard formats for it. I'm sure you can imagine. CSV gets us in there from that side of it. So again, maybe a week later, you could be looking at the last year's trading data versus what's happening right now. So that's why we did it. Ultimately, we've got the data, so why not make that data available?
And because you referenced the fact that you're effectively like white labeling Power BI, which I know a lot of people be used to. Does therefore Patchworks BI work as a standalone product where if I'm a customer not using your iPaaS, I could use a BI, or do I need to be an iPaaS customer in order to enable the BI model?
So you don't have to use our entire iPaaS. We just need to make sure that we've got that data coming through. So we've had inquiries on the back of the marketing and the launch we did last week during half term, annoyingly. But is there ever a right time to do a marketing launch? If you don't know me, people coming to us with Shopify sites or BC sites going, we really want to use this solution, but we're not a customer already. Is that okay? The way our pricing works, it'll include the connectors that we need to get that into the data lake from that side of it. So you don't have to be an existing customer of Patchworks to start using that data.
Okay, and if you are an existing iPaaS customer, is it rolled into the license, or is this an add-on where you can basically increase your license to get the BI as part of your overall suite?
It's very much an add-on because it's a different set of tools, ultimately from our side. You don't get it included. Some of our enterprise customers do, because, ultimately, if you come to us with enterprise pricing, like with most iPad or SaaS vendors, ultimately, we'll have a commercial conversation, of course. And it might be that you have the iPads, our BI solution, and our Soccer solution, our live service for managing inventory across multiple warehouses for Shopify. We can include all of that in a kind of a per site price, because most of the people who need that kind of thing are probably running multiple stores for, international reasons or whatever else. But yeah, fundamentally, it's an add-on if you're an existing customer and on a standard tier.
Okay, cool. And you've obviously, you talked about the leading e-commerce vendors that you already have connectors for, and ERPs, POS, etc. How would it work for a business that maybe has one of those common e-commerce platforms, but has some back office systems and third-party tools that aren't standard? how would they be able to connect those in? Like, what's the path to happiness for getting all the data in that lake?
So we have a connector called the inbound API. So if you have the ability to push data into our inbound API, that's almost like an anything connector, if that makes sense. So you can take that inbound API, move it through our mapping technology. There's some pretty cool stuff in there that the product team, Connor and guys at Belfast have built, which will, effectively fuzzy match sort of JSON objects. This is as technical as I get nowadays, to our internal mapping fields and then onto, the BI data lake. But if you don't have it right now, it's probably worth waiting for our next release of the product in June. So we're coming out with a kind of anything to anything connector. One of our investors actually called it the universal connector, which was a great phrase from a thanks finance guy. But the point of that would be is, connector wide, we have about 150 in the platform. We have about 40 connectors in our self-serve dash because that came out in Q4 last year. And that includes the big ones that you mentioned already, things like Bright Pearl, Linworks, Chaos Control. I've just got the sheet in front of me. NetSuite, Dynamics, Business Central, etc. I talked about already. If you did have a more unusual or a ERP that's not supported right now, frankly, we'd probably turn around right now and say, come back to us in June when we have a universal connector. Because the point of that connector as well, it will allow us to build the connector marketplace onto Patchworks. So, fundamentally, going forward, past, with a new product out there, it kind of won't matter because you can build a connector very quickly in the connector builder and then put it in the marketplace as an agency or a tech vendor and, sell it to more of our customers. That's the whole joy of the marketplace solution.
And yeah, I can see it because you often find, don't you, just in legacy stacks, one odd system that's been put in like 15 years ago that no one's ever heard of, and getting data in and out is always fun. So
I had some fun years ago, James. Sorry, man, but it was all CSV files. You couldn't. It was not human readable. That's all I'm saying. Numbers and commas. I mean, brilliant stuff. Yeah, those days are nearly long gone, but the big guys still use them, right? They're still in there.
Yeah, and also, let's not forget there are still some proprietary, I guess what I call black box systems out there where you don't have direct access to the back end, which means you're relying on like SFTP drives with shed loads of folders and files, and they don't always line up in terms of data structure, which therefore you need to have that intelligence. Okay, and I want to come back to something you touched on earlier. You said you can be up and running in a couple of days. Sometimes it might take like a week or so. What people want to hear is, so what setup work do the customers need to do? Like what resources, technical, non-technical, do they need to have in order to make this work alongside your team?
So that's the really good thing about this, right? I don't know if you saw on LinkedIn, I put out a call for e-commerce directors and IT people to have a look at it before we launched it, because I wanted to make sure, I've only been here a few weeks, that this was up to snuff and it was good stuff. And some of my old big commerce customers replied, and some customers from before actually, and had a look. One of them sent me a WhatsApp over the weekend. I won't say who they are. And I carefully chose the pronoun there as well, so you can't tell, if you know what I mean. As they were like, "What's the catch?" Yeah, who is? We'll go that route. But what's the catch? This seems really easy. The idea is you don't really need, unless you want to go down the route of that inbound API or our SFTP connector. We have one of those as well. If you're talking about the system that we already have, pre-built working connectors for that we know, are easy to use via the self-serve dash. You don't need any technical skill at all. And that's the really key. That's the key thing about software as a service, right? Effectively, what would happen is you get a login to your Patchworks dashboard. There's the BI menu item. You click on that, it will spin you up your standard reports, and you can go in and see them and use them and embed them in PowerPoint or export the data as needed ultimately.
Attract, your complete product discovery growth engine. Create relevant shopping experiences that convert into sales and grow online revenue with personalized search, merchandising, and recommendation solutions powered by AI. Find out more at attract.com.
And can you just talk? It'd be really useful to get a couple of examples of these pre-built, like default reports and dashboards. And then the second part to this question will be, what tooling is there to enable people to create their own custom data views?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so on the sort of report, we have three tiers. That seems to be the way that the market humans understand three, right? It's the mystical power of three. So we have standard, pro, and enterprise. So I'll come back to enterprise because that answers your second question ultimately. On the standard tier, you actually get quite a lot of reports out of the box ultimately. So there's a bunch of reports around order management. So you get an orders report, obviously see how you're doing, see what's going on with in terms of returns and where the orders are coming from, because it's not just e-commerce, right? If we've got your POS system in there as well, or your ERP, you can see a complete view of your business. Products and sales. So again, what are your top performing products? Which ones are you overstocked on? That seems to be a hot topic, not surprisingly, given the economic climate. But it also to make sure, what products you may have oversold, which also does happen, right? We see that quite often. That's what the stock of product is there for, is to try to prevent that ultimately. Refunds and discounts as well. So, promotion reports. From my last day at Ecommerce last year, I was pitching a large UK fashion retailer. And for a 3-hour pitch, well, 5-hour pitch, actually, we spent an hour going through reports, and BC's got great reporting, as does Shopify, as does CT, everything else, within the background. But if you look at the coupons and discounts across the entire estate, not just in e-commerce, that's a really key report for retailers, right? And I came away from that interviewing for Patchworks going, I think we've got an answer for this. So yeah, you also get inventory management reports, so sell-through, markdown, month-end inventory snapshots, days of inventory remaining, again, another key one, and an ABC analysis. I'm just reading off a list here, James, and I'm not entirely sure what that means. Advertising.
I say that it's a remarkably good memory for a Friday morning.
Yeah, you're all. I've had free coffee. Yeah. We also pick in all your traffic and digital spend data. So part of our setup, we'll connect through to your analytics solution and bring through the your traffic, digital spend, which is quite interesting. So you can actually see what your ad spend and your ROAS are looking like, and also some customer insights. So there's some standard reports that have been built there by our teams to do that as well. Additionally, on the standard thing, you get a daily refresh of that. And we can give you up to 2 years, like historic data, ultimately to get you there. On the pro tier, you actually get 4 times a day refresh, so it gets a bit more interesting from that side of it. Still no custom reports, but there's a couple of other additional reports. There's a merchandising report, which gives you really detailed 4 times a day view of stock status per day, retail value of stock, etc., and a daily alert report. That's quite nice. So it's a very quick, concise snapshot of activity. What's happening right now? If you have suddenly got a TikTok influencer on side, a friend of mine, Tom at Aisle 3 had this happen to him a couple of weeks ago. Suddenly the orders fly through the roof, right? And you need to know that. And so you get that on the pro tier as well. Then you get onto the enterprise tier. So enterprise tier, we can actually do, 6 times a day refreshing. We can effectively do any historic onboarding you want. And that's when it gets into the custom reporting side of things as well. So in terms of people making their own reports, we're actually hopefully, releasing very quickly the ability for them to have their own view onto Snowflake. So, you talk to an enterprise, quite often they're already using Power BI, like you said, and they just want access to the data lake itself and the data that's in there that we've done the transformations on to get it into it. So right now we can't do that. Not technically, it's a commercial conversation that we're in basically on that side. As soon as that's done, that'll be part of the enterprise offering as well. And on top of that, if you want to come to our BI experts, we have a team of experts who've already built these reports who are working on roadmap, but additionally can actually help build those custom reports for customers. We'll do that as a professional services engagement if you need it. But the key thing about Patchworks going forward is we're going to have an agency-led delivery approach. We want agencies to be able to use Patchworks like any other piece of SaaS software, and that goes for BI as well. So if there are any BI partners listening to this, or Power BI partners, give us a call, get in touch with me or Colin Stanbury, and have a conversation, because we could be a good lead flow for you.
And how does it work for multi-storefront? Because that's obviously one of the things that people most want is the simplicity of being able to filter views, being able to have roll-up aggregate reporting, split reports by currency, geography, etc. So what's the inbuilt international capability?
Yeah, so absolutely supports it out of the box. You'll be very pleased to know. And in fact, that's one of the first use cases that came along with these beta customers that needed a BI solution because, exactly that. They had 5 Shopify stores. Then they needed, to go to 5 different back ends or try and use GA to do it. But as already previously mentioned, won't include their in-store data either at the same time. So fundamentally, the way it works is you would have a number of different Shopify connectors all reporting into the same data lake. We will convert to the base currency of the business. And the reason I say that is because I think that's how people want to report. Normally companies are, reporting to the market or their investors or internally in a single currency. So that conversion will be done into the data lake, but that can be any currency, right? And ditto, if you wanted to go down the route of having separate reports in separate currencies, that could also be done. The storefront identifier is one of the things that goes into it as well. So if you wanted to drill into using Power BI, the orders report and say, okay, well, which one's coming from which store? You can do that too, right? It's just a filter option ultimately. So you can see how UK is doing versus France, for instance.
And you talked, you referenced earlier about the ability to pull in other data sources and use the Open Connector to bring that in. I'm assuming then if in the standard connectors on an e-commerce platform, if somebody's customized the order file, then that data is going to sit within the BI anyway, because it's part of that standard data transfer, right? So have you got any, I guess it's too early for interesting use case, but in principle, the ability to do things like if somebody's doing NPS surveys and passing those values back through, that you could then do segmented analysis based on NPS score and look at the impact on things like sales. So you could create those custom views yourself on the enterprise tier.
Absolutely right. Yeah, we could. We don't have anybody doing that, but I love that use case. And in fact, it's got me thinking about doing something with our NPS scores, to be honest with you. And we do use our Snowflake data lake internally as well. Not so much on the e-commerce side because we're not selling, right? We're not an e-commerce sales platform. But exactly like you mentioned, you've got the data there. We've got people who can build the reports. That's what the enterprise tier is all about, ultimately.
Yeah, I have a lot of conversation with people about the value of customer-centric metrics like NPS and using them to change behavior. Often people can't work out how to do the analysis easily. So the ability to have a centralized system where you can automate reports that show the value of happy customers is quite useful, gets people a bit more excited about it.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's like if you go through BA security and you've got those little smiley faces, there's a great use case on there. Then it's privately owned business, and they were talking about how I think it was Starbucks, one of the big US coffee chains, were using it to identify their best performing store managers, and they would take the person with the lowest score and put them into the best performing store, and vice versa, and see if it did. And if it did reverse, then they knew for a fact, right? And NPS is a bit like that. It's a really simple mechanism of saying how happy you are or not. And yes, if you look into the individual data, there's probably reasons for it. But if you look at the trend and the overview, it doesn't matter. Those reasons kind of go away. You can tell people are happy or they're not, right?
Things like it. My favorite example of it, of like the NPS stuff, is when the doctor's surgery says how likely you'd be to recommend it. Like, yes, get ill, come to this surgery. It's a lot of fun. It's a really weird thing. I get what they're trying to do, but it's a bit odd to recommend a doctor.
I agree.
I'd rather not be ill. But and how does for people who haven't used Power BI and other guises, how does the export and sharing function work? So how easy is it for people to set up automatic alerts to ping stuff to people? Is it all via email? Are you able to share to other tools through connectors? You talk us through that.
So it's basically the standard features that are available within Power BI. So by default, we can export into PowerPoint, and you can set up alerts and emails, like I say, via email, ultimately, to people to say that look at this report. You can embed a live report into PowerPoint, interestingly. So some authentication stuff that has to be done behind it. But that can be quite useful. I mean, fundamentally, the idea was let's make some reports that are useful to take to a board where you don't have to do any work. That's what you're paying us for, ultimately. They just sat there that way. If you go enterprise, then again, Power BI can be kind of unlocked a bit further for the right reports to be sort of exported into Excel or other features that are within it. But fundamentally, Power BI is a good product. People understand it because it's part of the Office suite and people are using it anyway. So we figured that, and it's web-based, of course, right? It just works on anything. So the idea for us was let's just take that tool that's a kind of market leader in simple standard reporting and then bed that into what we have within our dashboard. And so that's why we've gone down that route. There's nothing wrong with outsourcing something a multi-billion-dollar corporation's using, as long as it's good. As long as we can, which of course we can.
Well, it makes perfect sense to you, because you have that whole build versus buy, essentially, don't you? Do you use a market leader? Or do you build your own capability? But I guess the Patchworks, the integration specialism on top of an existing powerful BI solution is a no-brainer. So I can see why you do that, because the amount of development effort to build out a comparable BI tool as the engine would take quite a lot of time.
I spent the first 2 years of my professional career building management reports for Disney consumer products in Paris. And yes, I don't want to do that again. Because it was all bespoke.
And obviously this is early days, and you said you've got BI experts involved. They're busy planning the roadmap. Can you talk us through, is it too early to talk through product strategy and roadmap focus, or do you have a clear vision of where it's going to head in the next 6 to 12 months?
So there's some interesting stuff we're talking about. Some of the feedback we've had is that it would be great to have benchmarking in there. So there was a really nice benchmark post that popped up on LinkedIn this morning, actually, from Vinny in Ireland, around what conversion rates are. And I've actually shared that with the team BI. I'm talking to a couple of data providers, a couple of the big ones that you'll know, that the retailers provide their data to, because actually it'd be lovely for a retailer to think, oh, my conversion rate's 2% or it's 2.1. What does everyone else in fashion apparel in the UK do? How am I doing? Do I feel good about that? So some benchmarking stuff has been fed back to us. So I think the next 3 to 5 months is very much taking the customer feedback from existing customers and from the people we've demoed to, and rolling that into the standard reports, bluntly, from that side of it. So you won't see any major change, and I don't think you'll see any new reports. You'll just see the reports being refined a bit better on that side of it. The dev team is very much, ring-fenced and working on the product dev team on the new platform that I mentioned already. Because again, once we've got that in place, then that gives us additional BI capabilities, because we've got this anything to anything connector and the process flows and mappings that allows non-technical people to do the transformations they need to get the right data into BI.
Yeah, makes sense. You've alluded to briefly earlier about the commercial side, that there's a license. If you want BI, you can take it on top of existing Patchwork service, or you can just use it standalone. I'd love to kind of talk a bit more about how the license works as you grow. Is it purely on data throughput? Is it on users? Is it a combination?
Let me just flick to my pricing tab.
As if by magic is what I prepared.
As if by magic. It's almost like we've got some internal product training enablement stuff that I'm looking at right now. No, I don't want to talk actual prices. I think if anyone's really interested in what they're hearing here, the best thing to do is to contact us. We've got a contact us form on the website. Talk to me, talk to Tom Brewer, our head of sales. Get a demo in, and then we can talk about that. But the standard pricing is cheap. It's a few £100 a month, ultimately. We're talking about 72-hour setup time, like I said, and that gives you the reports and the refreshes I talked about before. Pro is about double that cost, so it's just over £1,000 right now. But the good news is we're not talking about anything around usage there, right? So you do get a certain number of seats, but you get more than one, right? Even in the standard one, if you're looking at it, I've got it written down here somewhere. To 5, you get 5 user accounts for standard, and you get 10 in Pro. So that'll probably cover most people off on that side of it. Again, enterprise, all bets are off. Come over the conversation, we'll carve a deal out. But we're not saying if you have, hundreds of millions of rows of data coming in, we're going to charge you more money. We probably should, but at the minute we're not, because of the way the unit economics work. We can offer it at this kind of good price because that's how SaaS is ultimately. The more you put on the front end, you can still build a profitable product by recognizing what your costs look like, and then just marking it up to a certain extent and passing it on to the user. So it's not volume based; it's based on the tiers and the number of seats, really, on that side of it, and how many times you want to refresh that data. It's more the way the costs are to us. It's the refreshing of the data rather than the amount of data that's the problem. So yeah, it's quite. It's again. That's why I got the WhatsApp over the weekend a few weeks ago saying, "What's the catch you got?" I'm like, no catch, sign now.
And if someone listening wants to get a demo or wants to drill into a bit more in terms of the full suite of reports, how can they go about that?
Super easy, actually. So anybody listening could, come to me if they wanted to, and I'll put them in touch with Tom Brewer, our head of sales. The real way is to come onto our website. If you come and have a look at wearepatchworks.com and click on the BI link, you'll find a nice video, some overview of the reports, a bit more detail, and a contact us form. So if you fill in that contact us form, one of the sales team will be back with you as soon as possible. Look to schedule a demo, to your convenience. Ultimately, you would come on with one of our solutions engineers. They would walk you through the product, and you get to see it. And then if it's a yes, sign up, and 72 hours later, you've got a report.
And I think one final question for me, because there'll be a lot of people who can understand the rationale and the value of why using a Power BI solution that's delivered by Patchworks with its integration capabilities makes sense. There might be others still thinking, why wouldn't I just use Power BI? Why do I need Patch? Can you just, for those who maybe still don't understand the difference, what's the value add, I guess, in terms of how you would explain to people or what Patchworks brings versus just going direct to a Power BI solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you're on one of those SaaS platforms I mentioned, or if you're on Magento, and you could exactly go down that route. And we contacted people and said, we've already built this. Great, fine. There's not for everybody. But if you are thinking about getting in some Power BI contractors right now, it's not just about Power BI. You've got to put that data somewhere. So you've got to create the data warehouse, data lake, whatever the modern term is for it, ultimately, and then put Power BI on top of it. And you've got to define those reports. You've actually got to build the reports you want as well, right? On top of that. That's the value add. We've done all that hard piece, if you know what I mean. So what could be a 5-month project ultimately to build all the reports you need and cost quite a lot of money on, a team of contractors, your own people, whatever it is, which would almost certainly, and then trust me on this because I've been there. Like I said, I did that work for DCP, didn't consumer products. I did it in financial services towards the end of the 90s, working with Bearing Asset Management on their MIS system. Other priorities come in. Data is really important until it isn't, if you know what I mean. And you've only got so many people. That all goes away. That's the value add ultimately. It's as simple as take your Shopify store, take your BigCommerce store, take your Commerce store, put the connector details in. And this is us doing this anyway. Once you've signed up, that goes straight into the data lake, and then you've just got the reports working. If you want to upload historical data, again, we can do that for you. That's again part of the fee and part of the commercial conversation. And then a week later, you've got actionable insights coming from the data that's in the data lake. So that's the value add. It's the speed of doing it, the lower cost of doing it, and the fact that it's a fully hosted solution that somebody else is keeping the lights on. You have to worry about that either.
Excellent. Look, thanks for coming on and for taking the time to answer the questions. It's been useful. It's interesting for me as well because obviously I've not looked at the tool yet, so I'm looking forward to that demo later on. And anyone listening who wants to challenge Jim on anything, wants to find out a bit more info, he's giving you the contact details, reach out. But thanks as always for listening. Keep your ears open for our next episode. We drop one every week. Remember to give us that rating on your YouTube or whichever player you're listening on. It really helps us with our visibility. So thanks. Take care, everybody. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gerd, or my co-host Paul Rogers via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.